And we're back with another episode of the Pursuit of Progress podcast. As always, my name is Adam here with my best bud, Ben. Ben, how are you doing today, man?
I'm doing great. Excited to go over this show. We're going to be talking about real estate, mortgage, first time home buyers. So very relevant, very excited, and can't wait to jump right in.
Yeah, these are topics that are always very common in our industries, but I feel like now more than ever, there's a lot of buyers sitting on the sidelines, a little
Yeah.
hesitant to take action. And I'm excited to have you as an expert when it comes to not only just the mortgage industry, but also specifically with first time home buyers, just to share with our audience some little tips and maybe some advice that they haven't heard before.
Yeah, and right now, as kind of up and down as choppy as this market has been, there's so many different moving pieces, from interest rates to just getting an offer accepted to what sellers are contributing. So if you're not someone that has stayed up to date and are aware and are really following the market, this is definitely something that you're going to want to listen to, especially if you're someone that's considering buying a primary residence, upgrading. If you're a first time home buyer, you're looking to buy an investment, lots of great information today.
For sure, man. So let's jump right into it. We're going to start off just talking a little bit about just the current state of the Colorado real estate market. Just a couple quick just points on my end as a realtor. I'm definitely noticing just April. I think April 15th. I saw recently a post that I think like April 15th was one of the busiest weeks of the entire year when it came to just activity in the Denver real estate market. That might even actually be a national statistic, and that's no surprise. Just kind of this springtime, everybody's kind of getting excited to potentially, move into a new home over the summer months and have their kids ready for the fall semester and
Yeah.
potentially in a different school district. But, this year I did feel like for a few weeks there, we were seeing, more activity, more showings scheduled, just more, just overall, just buzz in the industry. But I feel like that has kind of tapered off and hasn't been quite as dramatic as years past. What have you felt like on your end with that?
Yeah, the analogy that I use is, I think that buyers have one foot in, one foot out. They're interested, they want to do something, and in some cases, they are writing offers. But one thing that's unique is, we are seeing a lot more contracts get canceled after they initially go under contract at a much higher rate than normal. We also have buyers, walking away from counter proposals, and what that tells me is that buyers are just being, much more intentional about what they are, willing to accept from sellers. I think a big part of that, a big reason why, is it comes down to affordability. The name of my bank and where I work is North Point Bank. We're FDIC insured. And one thing that's really cool about North Point is that we're licensed in all 50 states. So I have the opportunity to work in all these different markets, all these different states, coast to coast. One thing, though, that is particularly difficult about our market in Denver is just the fact it comes down to affordability. The fact that home prices are so much higher, and then when you put that in tandem with higher interest rates, you might have a first time home buyer who's just buying a regularly priced home, putting down a smaller to medium sized down payment, anywhere from 3 to 10% down, but they're still looking at a mortgage payment of 4,000, 4,500, or more in some cases, just for a regularly priced average home. And so that's a lot, especially when you consider, when you start looking at incomes and wages. Have they gone up? Yes, but they have not gone up nearly enough to offset the cost of the increase in interest rates and payments. I had read a stat a couple of days ago. To buy a home in some of these high price markets, you would have to be making 80% more than you were just 3 or 4 years ago to have the same affordability. Obviously that's not the case. And so that's one of the big factors right now in this market that's holding folks back. When you have other markets, I'm doing right now a lot of deals in Oklahoma, Texas, some of the Midwest. Interest rates are going to be the same regardless of what state you're in. But when you're talking about a $200,000 priced home compared to a $700,000 priced home, the differences are exponential in when it comes to interest rates, or the amount of interest that you're paying, the monthly payments, and affordability.
Yeah, I believe that Denver is one of the worst states when it comes to the disparity between the average income compared with the median home prices, just that cost difference as opposed to a place like Houston, Texas, or Oklahoma, some of those other places you just mentioned. So,
Yeah, and I think with folks being able to do a lot more remote work after COVID, you can still a lot of times, not all the time, but you can still keep your same job and go move to a lower price market. I have a customer I'm working with right now, and she's doing that. She moved from Denver to South Carolina. She's a couple miles from the beach, and she just bought a home for literally $140,000. You can't, a single family residence, and you can't even think about doing that here in Denver. One thing that I think is encouraging, though, is that despite this market kind of sputtering along, home values are remaining constant. They aren't going down, or at least significantly from what I'm seeing. There are so many buyers and investors out there that are always so concerned and predicting the next crash. Well, we've had a lot thrown at us in the last 2.5 years. When you think about where 2022 started with interest rates, the first deal that I closed in 2022 in January was at 2.99. And the last deal that I closed in 2023 was over 8%. So that's an astounding increase in rates in a very short time. We've come off those highs a little bit. But as much as this market, as much, you think of all the geopolitical things going on right now across the world. Inflation is still persisting. The inflation report last week was not good, but what's happening? The market has still been very resilient from a value perspective. So to me, that's a very encouraging sign.
yeah, when it comes to values, it's kind of one of those things where no change is actually a positive in this case right now. I've just been keeping an eye on my personal home and just some of the other homes that I've recently helped sell. And they really haven't gone up at all in the last 6 months. They've really just remained almost completely neutral, but that is still better than obviously seeing a dip like we've seen in other times throughout the last 15, 20 years.
Yeah, winners in this
So
market
let's
right
just talk a little bit
now.
more now about.
Oh, I was just going to add one
Go ahead.
last thing.
Sorry to interrupt you.
I was going to say winners in this market right now are folks that are already homeowners, people that have owned homes, for the last 5 or 10 years. It's such an interesting time because on one hand, equity in American homes is as high as it's ever been. There are more homes that are paid off. According to some of the data that I've read, around 40% of the single family residences in the United States are mortgage free. So, on one hand, Americans' equity in their homes and their wealth is higher than it's ever been. But some of these same people that have record wealth are still having a very difficult time paying their bills from an affordability perspective. And so it's this very unique conundrum where, there is this record equity, there's this record wealth, but then, just getting the bills paid, you have a lot of people that are on fixed income, or, their salary hasn't increased and they have these other expenses. And so although they have this record equity, their day to day in their living is still very difficult. So it's just a very interesting time. And the losers right now in this market are folks that put off buying a home. The folks that were considering buying a home 2 years ago and wanted to wait. And you know what the saying is: the best time to buy real estate was yesterday. The second best time is today.
Yep, exactly. I was literally you took the words out of my mouth. I was about to say the same thing. So, just one last thing on kind of this talk of getting off the sidelines and just the amount of wealth that's currently in the country with homeowners. I think there's also some statistic about the average net worth of individuals that are homeowners versus renters. I think and don't quote me on this, but I believe the renters' net worth was like $6,000 or $8,000,
Yeah.
and the homeowners' net worth was like $350,000 to $400,000.
Yeah. Yeah, it's so
which is
interesting.
just crazy.
I do a lot of financial reading. I follow a lot of different financial podcasts. And so, two of the guys that I follow are Robert Kiyosaki and Grant Cardone. And they both have a lot of great content, specifically when it comes to real estate. One of the areas, though, that I disagree with them on is they always say that your home is not an asset. And what they mean by that is that the home that you live in is not an asset. And I disagree with that for the fact that you just mentioned. People that are homeowners have, on average, 2 to 3 to 400,000 or more in equity in their property, depending on their market, compared to renters who have a net worth of just 4 or 5. I think it's under 6,000. Your average renter. And so I'm not one of those people that paints a broad brush and tells everyone that they need to go become a homeowner right now. I believe that there is a right time. I think that you do need to be financially prepared, and especially today because interest rates are higher and there are some real affordability concerns. But when you look at the long term factors of building wealth, I believe that home ownership is very, very important, not only for the equity that you build, but this is the other thing that always gets left out that no one talks about. Your mortgage payment is fixed. And as time goes by, as your wages increase, inflation will actually absorb your mortgage payment. Warren Buffett says that the best debt out
Hmm.
there is the 30-year fixed, because as wages increase, your mortgage, essentially inflation will pay for your mortgage payment over time. So the example that I'm going to use is my house in Golden. I bought this nearly 10 years ago. And when I bought it, my mortgage payment was $1,700. And at the time, that was a very large percentage of my income. Well, guess what? 10 years later, my mortgage payment is still $1,700. And now you can't even rent a one-bedroom apartment in a bad area of town for 1,700. And so that is the thing. So when you have a stabilized housing expense, it just gives you the opportunity to do all of these different things with your money and build wealth, and you can take advantage of other opportunities. And so that's one of the things that gets left out. And then the other piece is the equity. You think
Hmm.
of how much over the last 10 years, especially in a market like Denver, how much our homes have appreciated. Like my home has doubled in value in the last 10 years. And so now I can put a home equity line of credit on my property. I can access that equity, and then I can create opportunities for myself and use that equity to go invest in other real estate. What I'm doing is I'm going out of market. And I know that you know this. A lot of the stuff that I'm doing right now is in Tulsa, Oklahoma, just because you can go buy a duplex in Tulsa for 185,000, 165,000, 200,000. Over the last year, my brother and I, we've gotten a total of eight. I'm sorry, we've gotten 8 units, 6 duplexes. I'm sorry, we've gotten 4 duplexes and then one single family residence. All of them are $200,000 or less.
And what are the average rents you're getting for a one bedroom and also for a two bedroom out there?
Yeah, that's the other thing. The amount of rent compared to the sales price is it's about twice as high as what you would get here in Colorado. So on one of our properties, for example, the sales price was around 200,000, and we're getting close to $3,000 in rent between both units. Here in Denver, you're not going to get anywhere near that.
No, you're going to be upside down probably by 50%.
Yeah,
You're going to have $3,000 a month in rent coming in, but the value of the home is going to be at least twice that. Very, very hard to make the numbers work right now in Denver.
yeah, you'll have $3,000 of rent coming in, but to acquire that asset is going to be 600,000. And then when you look at the mortgage payment, you might have to write a check every month to make it
Hmm.
work. And
Hmm.
that's not the position or the place that you want to be.
So one last comment on my end as a realtor, talking about just the really good point Ben made on, the people that are really bummed right now that stayed on the sidelines, didn't take action, and now they're regretting it and in this position
Mhm.
where they, just have some guilt behind not making a move when it was the right time to make the move. These lulls like we're in right now where we have higher interest rates and maybe it is a correct time to be on the sidelines if the numbers don't work for you. These are the times right now to be educating yourself and just really doing your homework, getting pre-approved, talking to lenders, talking to realtors, just being in a position where when things do turn around, you've done the preparation, you've done the back end work where you're ready to make that move when the time comes, as opposed to just using this time now as just, oh, it's a horrible market, I'm just not even going to think about it. And then when it does get good, you're going to be right back in the position you were in 2020, where you're just, again, not
Mhm.
prepared, not educated, and you're going to be sitting on the sidelines again and not able to take action in that next downturn where you're in a position where you can buy a home again. So I just want to implore everybody to just kind of keep that in mind, and feel free to reach out to either of us if you have questions about more specific details on your situation. But education and just the preparation behind all of this is really what I've seen all of the most successful real estate investors and just people that are buying just homes for themselves. The ones that are taking that action now and just preparing are the ones that are going to be the most successful.
That's exactly right, and I agree with you 100%. What's a losing mentality is folks that try and time the market. And this isn't my philosophy. This is a Warren Buffett philosophy. You should never try to time the market because in most cases you are not going to be able to time the market correctly. If you are someone, and this is more for investors out there, if you are someone that is buying in every market, you're always buying, you're always closing, what that is going to create is a natural hedge. So as long as you're buying on the ups and on the way down, you're creating a natural hedge for yourself. And to your point there are always going to be opportunities in every single market. One thing that I do is I write down, what are the challenges of the market? What am I going up against? But then where are the opportunities at? And so right now, a challenge in this Denver market is affordability. We also have high values, but there is silver linings right now in this market. There still are opportunities. And one of those is that as a buyer, you are able to get an offer accepted a lot of the times.
Mm-hmm.
You are
Mm-hmm.
able to get the seller to contribute, a significant closing credit on a lot of the deals that I'm doing. The seller has been contributing 10,000, 15,000 or more for the buyers, and they're able to use that to do a temporary buy down. So their interest rate in year one is going to be 2 or 3 percentage points lower than what the actual note rate is. And so that's a way to make the payment affordable, and the seller is paying for that. And so their mortgage payment might be $700 or $1,000 lower in year one, $500 lower in year two, $250 lower in year three, before it matures. And what's beautiful about that is that if rates do come down over the next 3 years, whatever whatever is left over in their escrow account for the buy down, they get all of that money back. It's actually their money. It's just sitting in their mortgage savings or their mortgage escrow account, getting the seller to pay for all of the closing costs. So there are opportunities, and that's where you want to make sure that you are staying up to date. You're working with, a lending professional, a real estate professional that really understands the market, just so you can, have someone really represent you to the fullest.
Yeah, I've heard a lot of pretty educated people in the industry in Denver specifically, with the challenges we're having right now, just with these buyers not able to take action at the moment, but just kind of comparing the two scenarios of where we are today with, let's just say, a 7% interest rate, and homes probably selling for the asking price, if not slightly lower, especially after negotiating some of these seller concessions, stuff like you just mentioned,
Hmm.
versus go backwards 2 years where we had 15, 20 offers paying up to maybe $100,000 over asking price. I'd
Yeah.
like to just get your feedback and opinion on taking those two scenarios. Do they even out in the end? Is there still maybe the potential that today's scenario is still more advantageous for buyers than it was for the people that bought 2 years ago and paid significantly over what their home is valued at today? And just there's still some underlying differences that don't really get talked about that much, where I guess one last thing before I give it over to you is,
Hmm.
so many buyers right now are on the sidelines that inevitably, when these rates do drop, and a lot of people are saying, I know I heard Barbara Corcoran from Shark Tank, she's a very savvy investor and realtor, was
Yeah.
talking about even just dropping 1% is going to just open up the floodgates where buyers are going to be coming out of the woodworks, and we're going to have maybe not to the extreme that we had a couple years ago, but this huge influx of buyer activity, which is going to once again push prices up, and just that dynamic of what's maybe better, what's worse out of those two scenarios.
Yeah, I mean, those are all some just some very interesting points. And I always, think of myself as a mortgage advisor. Even though I work for a bank and my title is a loan officer, what I want to do is I want to really help folks think about their mortgage and their home as a financial asset. And the mistake that I see most people make, especially first-time homebuyers, is what is your plan? What is your financial plan? What is your plan for this specific home? Are you going to be someone that, are you emerging and buying as a first time home buyer? And do you see yourself being a homeowner for the rest of your life? Are you playing the mortgage and real estate long game? Or is this something that is going to be more short term for you? Are you looking to get in and then get out? And so I think once people start thinking about what their goals are, what their vision is for themselves, that'll help provide clarity on, just answer some of those questions. And it can be different for every single person depending on what their goals are. I am a believer that if you play the mortgage and real estate long game, you can't lose. And I'm basing that off of my experience. I'm basing that off of, data over the last 200 years here in America. Me personally, I'm someone that bought real estate in 2019. I bought it in 2020. I bought it in 2021, 22, 23. I haven't bought anything in 24 yet. But again, interest rates are going up, they're going down, they're going even higher, but I am always buying. I'm looking for opportunities, and that's what I believe. That's one of my core beliefs. That's what I want to do. I want to continue to build my wealth and acquire assets. And you have to understand and accept that the market is going to go through these ups and downs. To kind of to your other point there about looking at the pros and cons from a couple of years ago compared to now, and there were some incredible benefits and opportunities a couple of years ago, but there were some incredible challenges. Like you're mentioning, a home is listed for sale, you're competing against 50 other buyers. And that's not an exaggeration. And I remember as a loan officer, I would have buyers that would just, wrote 50 different offers, and it's exhausting and fatiguing. And, that's a really, really difficult place to be, especially from the emotional investment. You find a home that you like, you want to purchase it, and then you can't, and
One
then you
thing,
go find another one.
sorry to interrupt you there, but one thing I think about too is that level of just anxiety and just buyers, just every home pretty much that was on the they were putting offers out on so many different homes, and it was just kind of this idea of like you kind of just got what you got, like whatever lottery
Yeah.
ticket you won on that home, that was your home. And I just wonder now, a year, two, going into maybe 3 4 years later, just how many of those homeowners just really aren't 100% happy with the purchase they made. I just got to think that there's a lot of people in the last couple of years that bought homes with really great interest rates. However, they probably sacrificed some of their non-negotiables, what they really wanted in a home: backyard, square footage,
Hmm.
anything you can think of. But I just think there's got to be a ton of people that are, a little bit not as quite as excited as they were when they won the offer and got the home that they were bidding on.
Especially after you wrote your 50th offer, that's when you
Yeah, exactly.
celebrate. But then all of a sudden the dust settles 2 years later, and you're like, okay, I paid 100,000 over asking. Is this the place really that I want to be? And you're absolutely right. That's why it is so important to, now, like the good side is that they still are in a home and they have the opportunity to still build equity. But that's what I always come back to. What are your goals? What is your vision? What are your non-negotiables? And really defining those, so that you're acting in your best interest, and then just having the discipline to act on that and execute on that. And so that's where sometimes first time home buyers will, make a mistake. We've all heard about that first time home buyer that's not interested in even buying a home. They haven't even thought about it. And then they go into an open house, on a Saturday afternoon, and then all of a sudden they want to write an offer. That is such an incredible mistake, because you are letting your emotions have total control and power over you. And that is not the way you want to go about purchasing a home. You want to do what you mentioned earlier in this podcast. You want to sit down, you want to take a breath, you want to define what your goals are, what can you afford, what can you contribute, and then you want to get pre-approved just to know that you can actually act on what you're hoping to do, and to make sure that what you qualify for is going to be in line with what you can actually afford. And you want to look at the financials and make sure that everything aligns, and then from there, that's when you want to start exploring. And when you do it that way, you can be very disciplined to make sure that you are staying, honoring yourself, honoring what your goals are, and not allowing your emotions to control you. In America, we are consumers. That is how the system works. All of these companies play on our emotions to get us to, buy things on credit, finance auto purchases, student loan debt. That's how the system works. You want to make sure that you take control, take your power back, and you are actually purchasing something that is in line with your goals and you can actually afford.
Yep, very well said. I think the last thing I'll just mention as from a realtor's perspective and why this preparation is so important is what I like to do with my clients is just have them sit down, at the dinner table with their family, whoever's going to be involved in this home purchase and going to be living in this home, and just really list out their non-negotiables. So just things that are just yes or no.
Mm-hmm.
Needs to be in a good school district, needs to have a backyard that's suitable for their young kids or for their pets, whatever it may be.
Yeah.
Just very, very clear non-negotiables, and then also have your must-haves, your want-to-haves, and your things that would be nice to have but aren't, deal breakers. By being able to really list that out and provide that to a realtor, that gives us so much more ammo to then really be more intentional on the home searches that we're putting together, the homes that we're providing to potentially go out and look at for our clients. That's from the realtor perspective. From the lender perspective, doing a very similar just preparation meeting ahead of time, even if you aren't currently in the position to even be buying right now, still having that conversation and finding out what you're going to be able to hopefully get pre-approved for. And also something we don't talk about that often is by doing so, you're going to have that financial checkup. You're going to get your credit pull. You're going to see where you're at, and you're going to have the time leading
Yeah.
up to when you're going to be purchasing a home and putting in offers to correct and hopefully work on improving things that might not be as in a position where they need to be. Your credit score, the amount
Mm-hmm.
of money you're going to need for your down payment. By waiting until you go out and search for homes, it's too late. You're not going to have the time, which you're going to need to do some of these things like your credit score and just potentially saving extra money or talking to a family member about getting some assistance with the down payment, whatever it may be.
Yeah. Yeah. And when you do it the way that you're describing there, where you're kind of rushing through everything and you're maybe not fully prepared, dude, it is so damn stressful to do
For
it that way.
everybody.
For it's stressful for the individual, for the loan officer, for the real estate agent. So that's where I always just encourage folks. And the customers that I work with, we do things a little bit different. We do a full pre-approval up front. We gather all of the information. We review credit. We have a conversation over credit. If we need to get that up, I'm going to let my customers know what they need to do, what actions they need to do to get it up. And we're going to we're going to review the tax returns, the W-2s, the pay stubs. So when they go out and start looking at homes, all of those big hurdles and challenges have already been addressed and everything's been pre-underwritten. And it creates such a better customer experience for the home buyer. Kind of last point I'm going to make is I'm just going to share a quick story on how you were talking about non-negotiables, what you want, what you need, what your non-negotiables are, things that you'd like to have. The last vacation rental I bought in Arizona, I did that. I wrote down what were my non-negotiables, how many bedrooms I was looking for, and two of the big things that I wanted was a heated pool and a spa in a property. And it's when you start looking at properties, and there's not a lot of properties in Tucson that have both the heated pool and the heated spa. There are, but there just aren't nearly as many that come up. And so I got off of my non-negotiables. I ended up buying something, the last property that I bought down there that had a pool, but the pool was not heated, and then there was no spa. And that was because I got emotional.
Mm-hmm.
And there were other factors of the home that I really, really liked. And it was a really beautiful home, but it didn't have these two things. And in the vacation rental world, having the heated pool and the heated spa, you have to have those. Especially if you're going a little bit more luxury, which is what this property was. And it just didn't perform at the level as some of the other properties were. And it's because it didn't have those same amenities, because I didn't stay committed and disciplined to my non-negotiables. So I did end up like buying a hot tub. So we do have a hot tub now, but it's not the same as a spa. A spa is definitely, the in-ground spa is definitely preferred. And we have the option to heat the pool. We just haven't done that yet, but there's a significant cost to do that. So it really is just a great reminder: define what those non-negotiables are, and if you're defining them up front, make sure that you stick to them.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Very well said. Yep. Well, you learn from your mistakes, so one and done. You won't do that again, hopefully.
Yeah, exactly.
So, guys, we'll just kind of close out this episode. But before we do, I just wanted to give a quick plug on my end, and I'm sure Ben also would probably feel the same as what I'm about to say. But I have a really great, just a totally free. It's a 31-page buyer's guide that just goes through the entire process from start to finish. I also have a few pages in that are sharing more info on lending and some of the stuff that Ben's talked about. But it's totally free. I'll include a link in the show notes down below. You can also just check out my website. It's adamsellsdenver.com. But we'd love to just provide that to you guys as a resource if you're in that position where you're just unsure where to start and want to take action by preparing today for when that day comes in the future. Ben, I'm sure you would be happy to meet with anybody that's curious and wants us to learn a little bit more about the lending side as well. What would you like to close us out with?
Yeah, I'd love to do that. And I just want to be a financial educator. One of my passions is that financial literacy, financial education, mortgage and real estate education, none of this is taught anywhere. And so many of us are just uneducated. We've never learned about how to manage money, how to build wealth, what to look for in real estate. We're just acting and behaving off of what we're told by the media or by family members who are also a lot of times not educated, and that's just not how it should be. So I have a YouTube channel called American Money 101, and we just touch on really everything financial related: student loans, credit, how to improve your credit, how to protect your credit, how to build wealth, real estate, really everything that you can think of. I have a new video coming out here soon, just on some of the most impactful books that I've read from a financial literacy perspective. So please make sure to check that out. American Money 101 on YouTube.
Yeah, you're putting out a ton of great content on there, so definitely you guys should all go and check that out. All right. Well, I think we had a ton of good value today, a lot of nuggets of just different tips and things maybe that you aren't thinking about. So hopefully you guys got some value. If you did, would love for you to please like and share this with a friend. If you know somebody else that might be in a position that would also get value from this, that's the best compliment you can give us, is just by sharing the show and helping us grow our audience. So from my end, hope you guys have a great rest of your week, and we look forward to sharing another episode next week. Ben?
On the pursuit of progress.
We'll catch you guys
Peace.
later.